The point is, you hear even when you're not listening, but you do not see unless you're looking. The reason we rule the planet is we're able to attach specific meanings to sounds. An idea can turn to dust or magic, depending on the talent that rubs against it. The real giants have always been poets, men who jumped from facts into the realm of imagination and ideas.
Right.
You have to jump from facts into imagination, and that's what a poet does. And every great ad writer is a poet.
Advertising is a tax you pay for not being remarkable. Welcome to Todd Liles and the Wizard of Ads, a podcast for business owners who want to become remarkable. Tulip Todd Liles is going to take you deep into the mind of Roy H. Williams, the Wizard of Ads, to unleash the timeless truths and secret strategies that have helped him build dozens of America's most successful businesses. Do you want to build a brand that wins the heart, captures the mind, and creates lasting relationships? Take a deep breath and buckle up. It's time to fly.
Today we're going to get right to the heart of the subject matter, which is radio versus digital. Where should we be spending our money and why? And if the listener is interested, I went into a really deep dive in Monday Morning Memos.
Okay.
Mostly I've been taking content from your books, but I wanted to go to some of the most recent research and most recent articles that you've written. So I want to give a quick reference. This is from No One Listens to Radio Anymore, Branded versus Unbranded Keywords, Radio versus Pay-Per-Click, and the Radio Success Formula. So we're going to jump straight into this. I'm going to go to the immediate question first. Why do so many people believe that, quote, no one is listening to radio anymore?
I'm not sure. It's mostly because most people don't realize how much they listen to the radio.
Right.
I have a client. It's a big law firm in California, San Jose and San Francisco and all of Northern California. And they have just exploded. I mean, it's a very old firm, very big firm, and then started working with them about 2.5 years ago, and they've more than doubled. I mean, they're just really happy about it. And they said, the funniest thing is something that you told us. And I said, well, I told you a lot of things. What was it? This is a very recent call. And they said, you told us that we said, well, we don't listen to the radio. We don't know anybody that listens to the radio. I said, oh, okay. I said, I hear that all the time. And I said, within 6 months, you're going to have people coming at you. You can't go anywhere without somebody who knows you walking over and say, hey, man, I haven't seen you in a long, long time, but I hear your ads all the time, but I never listen to the radio. I never listen to the radio, but I hear ads all the time. And I'm saying after a while, people telling you this, it's going to crack you up because all these people genuinely believe they never listen to the radio, but they hear your ads all the time. And your ads only play on the radio.
Right.
And then they said the judges, the other lawyers, the insurance companies, everybody's going, oh my God, you guys have they're saying you've brought dignity back to the profession of personal injury law. You've brought in blah, blah, blah. I'm going, yeah, just you can't bore people to death. The point is, me and all my friends don't listen to the radio. You know a real fact? I haven't actually intentionally listened to the radio in over 25 years. I hate radio. The ads piss me off. The ads make me throw up in my mouth a little. And I just hate it. And I never listen to it. So why do we spend many hundreds of millions of dollars on the radio every year? Because we know exactly how many people are listening.
Yeah.
We know more about them than Google can tell you about their audience or that Facebook can tell you about their audience. The stuff that's known about the radio audience, precisely who they are, precisely how many there are at every moment of the day, 365 days a year, we know this.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, and I didn't know any of this information until I started hanging out with you, that if we look at the devices that measure attention when it comes to radio, personal people meters, right? Nelson data, all this information.
Portable people meter. I always say personal, but it's portable.
It's portable people meter. Gotcha. And we've mentioned that in previous episodes before, and I don't want to try to prove to the listener.
Yeah, right.
But the fact is that at one recent study, still 50% of Americans are listening to the radio each week.
Right.
Not 10%, not 5%, a strong 50% of Americans are still listening to the radio this week. And for me, that says it is a powerful medium. And I think there's another statistic that we could look at that's just sort of like an in-your-face statistic, which is radio stations haven't gone out of business en masse like newspapers have.
Right.
People are still getting in their car, even though you got your iPhone, you can plug in your music, listen to what you want when you want. People still enjoy turning on the local news, very much like the local TV news, and seeing what's going on locally.
Traffic reports, weather reports,
Absolutely.
etc. Right.
So these things are there. Now, if we go to, I think I'm just going to sort of put a pin in it and say people are listening to the radio. End of story. Not
Gotcha.
going to prove that here. You can prove
Right.
that. Look up, just find that out. There is something that radio does that I don't think a lot of people understand, which is this thing called echo retention, which is one of the reasons why it's incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
Would you just touch on that for a moment?
Okay. So echoic retention is basically the memory of sound. Professor Steven Pinker was the chair of the Department of Brain and Cognitive Science at MIT for like a dozen years. And he left there about 20 years ago to take that same position at Harvard. Harvard Medical School, Professor Steven Pinker, 5 years ago, was one of Time Magazine's, one of the 100 most influential people in America. He's written a whole bunch of books about writing, a whole bunch of books about persuasion, and he's a scientist, a cognitive neuroscientist. How do people make decisions? That's cognitive neuroscience. And it's not philosophy, it's not psychology. And he basically says the reason that human beings rule the earth is it's not the opposable thumb. I mean, monkeys have those, right? But a lot of people say it's the opposable thumb. We can grasp. I'm going, lots of things can grasp. It's our ability to attach complex meanings to sounds. Takes the average reader approximately 38% longer to understand the written word than to understand the same word when spoken. Babies do not learn to read first and then learn how to speak. They learn how to speak by listening and imitating the sounds. We are born with patches and lobes in our brains that the animals don't have, specifically Wernicke's area, the Broca's area, and the arcuate fasciculus. The arcuate fasciculus is a high bandwidth bundle of nerves like Google Fiber that connects Wernicke's area to Broca's area, from behind your left ear to forward of your left ear. In the dorsolateral prefrontal association area is the center of working memory, which is conscious awareness, the thought you were thinking now. And then just forward of that is the prefrontal cortex, where decisions are made. All yes answers, all plans, all judgments, and all decisions are made right behind your forehead. Your brains are tied by the optic nerves between the two hemispheres of your brain to a place just above your skull. I mean, just above your spine at the base of your skull. Reach back there and feel it. Just above your spine at the base of your skull. That's what your eyes are connected to. Now, the visual cortex is at the back of your skull. The decision-making part is at the front. It's a long and winding road from visual capture to decisions, and there's literally 10,000 billion synapses that it has to pass through to get there. Whereas auditory memory is the entire temporal lobe. Then all the other parts of the brain fan out from in a human being, like the tail feathers of a peacock. And so we are creatures of sound.
Right.
And the written word has no meaning until it has been translated into the spoken word it represents. And this is known. And so when you use unusual, unexpected words, you get attention. And when you can describe things vividly, people see them in their mind. And this is one of the things that happens in working memory in the dorsolateral prefrontal association area. And you can read a 1986 book by Alan Baddeley. It's hard to say. Alan Baddeley, Baddeley, and it's called Working Memory. And he talks about this entire process. It's a scientist. These are cognitive neuroscientists. They're not salespeople. They're not philosophers. They're not psychologists. They're none of that. This is like actual biochemical data.
Right.
And they're saying this is how it all works. Now keep eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. 5 separate organs, the skin being the largest organ of your body, but the information is gathered, processed, and retrieved from memory in 5 separate and largely unrelated parts of the brain. The largest by far of those is the memory of sound. And whenever you look at how sound informs all the other areas, and echoic memory, the thing you're talking about is this. Anything that comes through our ears, you can close your eyes, but you can't close your ears.
Right.
How else would you know there's a burglar in the house
Exactly.
when you're fully asleep? The point is, you hear even when you're not listening, but you do not see unless you're looking. And the idea that your ears are always on and they always interpret what you're hearing, anything that's new, surprising, or different, and it will turn your attention to the thing that is new, surprising, or different. Your eyes aren't quite like that. And what comes through your eyes, it disappears in less than 0.8 of a second. It's gone, which is why eyewitnesses can never agree on what they saw. Tons of studies have been done about this, but they all agree to a high degree of specific detail about what they heard, because what comes through your ears is there for about 4.5 seconds, then it begins to fade slowly. And so even if you're not listening, even if you weren't paying attention to it, what you hear goes into echoic retention, and it stays there. And with enough repetition, you're driving that nail through the board and then clinching it on the other side. The nail being your message, the board being the mind, and repetition being the strokes of the hammer. And I'm going, sound is a marvelous selling tool. In fact, it's the only selling tool. When you use written words, those written words become sound in the mind of the reader, and the sound of the words in the mind, even when a person's reading silently, the sound of those words, the meter, the interesting, vivid qualities of the descriptions that you write, and the sense of emotional relatedness where you identify, I have felt that before, I have experienced that before, I'm engaged by this. If you know how to write that way, guess what? Your ads work.
Yeah. I love the study of the brain. And I just recently finished Peter Thiel's book, Outlive. And in the section of Outlive, he goes into a deep, deep dive into why sleep is so critical. And he began to unpack what was happening from a real in the brain perspective when we fall asleep.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I didn't realize is that the neurons literally have the power to retreat.
Right.
And he said that when we lay down, that our brain, as long as we're healthy, has this moment to where spinal fluid comes into our brain,
Mhm.
the neurons retreat off their connections, and it gives it a chance to go through there and begin to flush. And it's flushing out lots of things. It's flushing out essentially waste, and it's giving the brain a chance to restructure, and then the neurons reconnect. So when he's talking about all these things, he's going over the power of sleep, but then he makes a very specific point, which it goes all the way back essentially to the fundamental concept of what Darwin came up with, is that as we were developing as a species, we first had sleep at cycles with Earth and natural rhythms. But when you said, hey, you still hear when you're sleeping, and I'm taking a little bit of a derision here, but when we are asleep, our hearing is the only thing that we have that is a protective source.
Right.
It's also one of the reasons why you will occasionally wake up in your sleep and you'll look around, but then you go back down because something, whether at the end of a sleep cycle or a noise, something has triggered you, but that hearing never turns off because it is the only constant defense mechanism that we have.
Right.
So it is extraordinarily, extraordinarily powerful to the point that I don't think people really understand how deep and how just biologically ingrained it is in us.
Another thing that Steven Pinker said is the reason we rule the planet is we're able to attach specific meanings to sounds. And
I
the
get that.
animals, like a dog or even a horse, simple commands with enough repetition, simple word, they can understand what that word means. So they have the ability to interpret sounds to a very, very limited degree, but they can't speak. They can't create sounds that have highly specific meanings. And I want to hear about whale song and all that stuff. I promise it's not as specific, detailed, and robust as the sentences that human beings can put together to describe highly specific, extremely detailed things.
Right.
And so one of the things Bill Bernbach said, and I was ranting about him in our previous, raving rather than ranting, in a previous episode, he said, an idea can turn to dust or magic depending on the talent that rubs against it. The real giants have always been poets, men who jumped from facts into the realm of imagination and ideas.
Right.
You have to jump from facts into imagination, And that's what a poet does. And every great ad writer is a poet. The same idea, the same data, the same information, the same possible story, right? In the heads of the wrong person turns to dust. But if talent rubs up against it, if a poet rubs up against it, then you can turn it into magic. And so what you extract from the client doesn't matter as much as knowing the angle of approach that you should use to introduce that into the public consciousness.
I tell you, we are both obviously reading things that we're greatly influenced by right now. And I'm going to make one more reference to a T, and then I'm going to get to this question that's
Okay.
written down
Okay.
here. Is in his book, he refers to it as the science and the art.
Mhm.
And he unpacks that. He goes, because the science is the data. He said, but the art part of medicine is the fact that the data is only true across a certain set of information.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily individual.
Right.
A really quality doctor is going to understand that the art is in the practice. And what that brings me to is that you often refer to people who think that the data is superior above all as digital weasels.
Yeah, digital weasels.
Right, because they're only looking at one piece of the information, but they're not necessarily asking the question of what influenced it. At least that's the way I interpret it. I want to get your perspective
No,
on that.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm absolutely agreeing with you. I actually am halfway through a Monday memo right now that I'm working on, and my belief is this. I was asking the same question. Yes, there's science in advertising. There's also art. Then I asked myself, what's the difference between science and art?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Science is objective, and it is always repeatably true and measurably true. And whether you accept it or not, it still remains true. It is an objective thing.
Absolutely.
Now, an art cannot be objective. Art is always subjective. And what you said about the writer that you're reading, he was basically saying, yeah, the subjective part is it doesn't always affect everyone the same way.
Right.
And so the data hasn't changed, but your presentation of the data will influence this person one way and influence a different person a different way. Some are attracted to you, some are repelled from you, but the art is the subjective part. The application of the science is the art. And so you have to have information, you have to have data, you have to know the facts.
Mm-hmm.
But yet how those are presented is the talent that either makes it dust or magic.
So that's the Monday morning memo that you're working on right now.
Yeah, I'm like 2/3 through it.
How are we always like
You and I have that
we are
connection.
always so in sync?
We have that connection. It's weird. We've barely known each other a year. I can't explain it.
I think it's a spiritual thing, and it's also the way that we are wired. So it's really fascinating.
Same brand of crazy.
Same brand of crazy, right? No randos in the canoe. Uh, so the essence of the digital weasel, and I like this animal equation now, is because the weasel's kind of smart. Like I work in a pet store.
Extremely.
Yeah, they can get through a maze. They
Right.
can go for the object. They know where the
Right.
cheese or the food is. They'll get there. But ask them to think originally, they have a hard time with it.
And so I wrote a thing recently that I don't think anybody understood. Details first, and then building something principle by principle, line upon line, brick by brick, step by step. That's called structural thinking. And you have to be able to do that. It's absolutely essential that you be able to do that when that's what needs to be done. The opposite of structural, which is details first, step by step, is Gestalt. Gestalt thinking is essentially right brain thinking. If you want to think about it loosely, left brain is structural, right brain is Gestalt. Dr. Roger Sperry, 1981, Nobel Prize.
Right.
So in the right hemisphere, whenever you think of something and you see the finished thing, you see it in its completeness, in its glory, in the most infinite detail, and you don't even know where to start. But you're saying, okay, I see this finished thing, and if I can create this, it would be amazing. That's what the world needs right now, is to create this. Steve Jobs did that. I can name all the people who think Gestalt, and then they say, okay, now, if we're going to reverse engineer this thing I see in my mind, how would you construct that? And so the behavior, when you're thinking Gestalt, the behavior of the components is determined by the nature of the finished product. The nature of the finished product, which we know from the beginning, this is the nature of the finished product. This is its personality, its oeuvre, its essence. All right. The component, what would be the nature of the component that would, how would this, such a thing, how would this company call a person? How would such a company greet a person?
Mm-hmm.
How would such a company reach out to a person for the first time? What kind of a warranty would such a company offer? So whenever you know the nature of the finished thing, then you ask, how would that thing do this?
Right.
How would that thing do this? And once you know the personality of this thing, okay, now we have to say, well, how would a company that believed these things and valued these things and cherished these things and never compromised these things, how would it? And then no matter what you ask, you know exactly how they would
Right.
do it. Then you say, okay, now how can we create that? And so the picture of the finished thing dictates the process of creating it.
Yeah. So when I think about that from an operational standpoint, this is the way that I see it. Gestalt is the big picture. Like you said, structure is the detail.
Mhm.
If we were to take that and say, how does that apply operationally? I would say culture is the gestalt.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the SOPs are the details.
Mhm. Yes.
And I will often say to potential clients that culture will eat strategy for lunch or for
Right.
breakfast. And they go, I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. I say, here's a short answer of it. Is if you believe that you must system and procedure everything to the nth degree, it means you have no culture. Because if you have a culture, a big vision where we're going, and a way of believing, and a way of behaving, and a way of thinking, you actually don't need an SOP for every little detail, because what you're doing is you're just wasting ink and paper and time and energy, because the energy is invested. It's in the people. They get it. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't key aspects that we want to document for repetition. Of course there are. It just means that if you get to, like you say, digital weasel, to me it's SOP weasels.
Right.
When they
Gotcha.
need a book this thick because they want to document how to put a paperclip on a stack of papers,
Right.
that to me says you are just don't have a culture.
Right.
You've got a control freak scenario. You're out of control. Um,
Let me
yes.
add to that for a second, because I agree with you 100%. Mike Tyson, okay, you're talking about how culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes.
Okay. Strategy has a plan. Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
That's right.
Now, culture knows how to respond to a punch in the mouth.
Yep.
The plan doesn't know how to respond to a punch in the mouth, but culture knows how. And so culture can take a punch in the mouth and know exactly how to respond. You will not find it in the SOP because the punch in the mouth was not planned for. It was never expected, but culture still knows how to deal with it.
Jesus turns the other cheek.
Mm-hmm.
Peter chops off the ear.
Right, exactly, or tries to.
Or tries to.
Well,
tries
try
to
to
chop
stop
off the head.
yeah, his head.
But he got the ear.
Got the ear.
And culture puts the ear back on and goes,
Yep.
we're not going to do
We're not doing that.
We're not
Exactly.
doing that.
Well, that's a good metaphor.
So let's jump over, because we're anti-digital weasels. We're not anti-digital, right? We know there's a space for
And listen, I have among the partners, as you know, some astoundingly talented and intelligent digital marketers, and that's why we made them partners. But they will tell you that in the grand scheme, nationally, it's maybe 10% of all online marketers, all digital marketers, really know what they're doing and know how to do it right and do it with the right reasons, the right motives, and the right principles.
Right.
And they said, but the other 90, there's kind of a culture that it's the outliers that do it right for the right reasons and just have the integrity that you value. And so when I say digital weasel, I'm not talking about all digital marketers. I'm talking about the ones that are deceptive and they believe, well, they don't mind. They use data like a drunk man uses a lamppost. Mark
Love
Twain.
this quote.
Yeah, I believe it's Mark Twain. He said, you can use information or data. Most people use it the way a drunk man uses a lamppost, for support, not for illumination.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you gather data looking for what does this data tell me and how many different ways can this be interpreted? And what might each of these different things it could be telling me, what might those be? Because data never says just one thing, ever. When you look at data, it can always be interpreted more than one way. You find what you're looking for. You find in the data the thing that supports your premise or
Right.
your prejudice or your assumption or your hope. And I'm going, and when people start doing that, it doesn't matter what the data says, it's
You
going
can
to
find it.
reinforce exactly what they were hoping it would say. And this is what the really weak digital people do that. They will look at the wrong data that actually has no benefit, and they'll figure out how to spin that to prove what they've been telling you.
Right.
And that is just not helpful.
Well, it's when they have their own preservation and interest in mind.
Right.
And by the way, I believe that sort of thing could happen across any platform. It could happen in the medical world,
Absolutely. It happens in
accounting
radio.
world.
It happens in television.
Happens everywhere.
It just tends to happen with a little bit more enthusiasm and science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
The objective science that's been used subjectively.
Right.
And so in the online world, the reason people are attracted to online marketing is because it's so easily measured.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand, yes, it's easily measured, but the presentation of the measurements can be wildly distorted, and you won't realize it because it will all make perfect sense. And so, like I said, this is the thing right now, just so you'll know. I had a long conversation with one of our partners yesterday, and I said, we have to devise a way for media buying in the digital space that is actually intelligent, comprehensive, easily understood, and absolutely true without spin. And I said, how can we do that? And after a series of very long conversations, yesterday we realized exactly how we plan to do this. It'll be another few months, maybe 6 months, before we have it all figured out. But the need for it is desperate. And I've had it on my mind for years. And so the conversation we're having right now, you didn't know any of this, and you're a partner, because I'm only just now finally found the information I needed. I don't know how to do it, but I do know how it needs to be done and the people who can do it. And we're going to solve this once and for all. And like I said, that's how big of a thing it is. This is my least favorite thing to talk about as digital.
Right.
And it's my least favorite thing because it's so wildly screwed up right now.
It is. Normally at this time, we may transition over to an ad, but I don't want to do that today.
Okay.
I actually want to dive, going back, remember the content today, listeners, taken from several articles that were written in the Monday Morning Memos. And in one of the articles, with permission, you unpacked what was true at that time with Gettle.
Mhm.
And I'll just give you a little reminder. Let me read this here. I'm giving you the abbreviated short notes. Gettle had cut its digital budget by half and started investing in a 52-week radio campaign. This would led to dramatic increases in brand recognition. But for those that want data, the real essence of it comes down to this. The cost that was attributed to Ken per reaching a lead went from $441 to under $50. And this did not occur until we had invested in radio, and radio drove traffic in all other formats. So what I want to do is just talk about that case study. And by the way, that case study was a snapshot of that moment in time at Gettle when they were doing all those things at that moment in time. So take us back there, and if you don't mind, can you tell us why they went from when they were digital only, $441 for a lead, and then when they started adding radio, by the way they tracked it dropped down to 50. That's a massive decrease.
Right.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, it's real simple. Remember, this whole thing, it didn't surprise me, but it was two pivotal moments, two very, very, very pivotal moments. When Ken and I very first started working together, and by the way, after we're done recording, I'll play you the new auditory signature I created for his new company.
Okay.
It's a gift. He doesn't even know I did it. But he bought me a $5,000 toilet one time as a joke, and my wife loves it. And so I said, okay, he needs an audio signature for his new company, so I'm going to have him one created. I had it in my mind. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I hired Michael Torbay to create it in his studio, and he did.
That's awesome.
I'll play it for you. I love it. Anyway, the point is, Ken remains a close friend, and when we very first started working together, I said, Ken, listen to me. I said, here's the thing I'm the most worried about. We hadn't even started running the radio ads yet. Hadn't even started them. I had showed him the script. This is what we're getting ready to do. 10-year-old boy holding a flashlight for his dad. And I said, this is the ad we're going to start the company with. And he goes, okay, I like that. And I said, it's a game changer, Ken. He goes, you think it's a game changer? I said, promise it is. I absolutely promise it. And I told him why. And he goes, yeah, that makes sense to me. I believe it. I'm excited. And I said, cool. And I said, now here's the thing I want to tell you now so that I have credibility. He says, what is it? And I said, right now, how much are you spending on digital marketing for Gettle? $2 million a year. $2 million. I said, okay, what's your average cost per sale or lead or whatever? I said, what's your average, how much, tell me how it's structured and how that's paying off for you. And he named a number, and it was a lot. It was hundreds of dollars. And then I said, is there anything that's going to change that? He goes, no, it's not going to change. As a matter of fact, don't worry about that number. Don't worry. It's everybody that's average for the category. Everybody pays about that same amount. And I said, okay. And so everybody's happy with paying this much. He goes, yeah, it's a level playing field. Everybody pays about that much. And this is why companies believe, well, I'm just going to outspend everybody and get all the business. Okay? That's how you go broke, by the way.
Absolutely.
And so what happens is I get why people believe that because it's so easily measured. And so it's not effective. It's horribly ineffective, but it's easily measured. And people
look, I can show you how I'm going out of business.
Exactly. People love measuring things. And so I said, so listen, is there any reason that number is going to start going down? He goes, no. And I said, so it ain't going to happen for a few months, but about 6 months from now, you're going to start noticing that number really begin to come down rapidly. And I said, a year from now, that number is going to be way lower than it is right now. And guess who's going to be taking credit for it? And he said, who? And I said, your digital people. And he says, why would they take credit for it? He says, all the leads are still going to be coming through the website. Google's the new phone book. And I says, you have to start measuring branded keywords. He says, what's that? And I said, it's basically the name of your company and the recurrent phrases that we use called brandable chunks. These little chunks of sentences, these little phrases that we're going to use unique to your company. And we're going to have to tell them how to spell Gettle. Goettl. It'll keep you cool, but it's hard to spell. And so I had to have a rhythm and a meter and a rhyme to make that Goettl. People didn't even know how to pronounce the word. And I said, so I have to say this, and I have to make it meaningful. I have to make it emotional. I have to make people connect to it. And I says, when that happens, they will start typing your name into Google. They will not type it into the URL. They will type it into Google. And then Google will let them click to your website. No matter how much we want people to navigate there directly, very few will ever do it.
Yeah.
They'll still type it into Google. So it'll look like your digital team is just doing a miraculous job. And they're going to say, look, we have all these new things we're doing. It's brought your cost way down. Aren't you happy? And I said, so when they say that, remember, they didn't do it. I did. I said, will you please remember that? And he goes, yeah, that makes sense to me. I'll remember that. And I said, cool. Now, a year later, Ken happened to be, this is the other moment that I remember. I brought together a couple of dozen clients, pretty much all the clients that I had. It wasn't even a couple of dozen. And Brian Scudamore was there from When Hair Got Junk. Michael Gerber had come in to speak to us about the E-Myth. And then I had the owners of all, Dewey was there with his key people. And Ken was there, and they had never met. And I had all these other people there from all these other companies we work with, and the lawyers and the diamond people, the jewelry people, the Rolex people. And I had Scudamore make a really amazing presentation. And then Gerber spoke for a few minutes. And then I talked a little bit. And then I just started having different people in the room stand up and tell stories and answer questions. And so Ken popped up, and he said, we were paying this much per lead or per sale or whatever this many months ago. And I said, how much is it now? I didn't actually know. I hadn't even asked. I remember telling him to keep his eye on it a year earlier. And we'd been 12, 13, 14 months together. And he named the new number, and I started laughing. And he goes, yeah, I'm saying why you're laughing because you told me this was going to happen. And I said, are the digital guys trying to take care of it, trying to take credit for it? And he goes, yeah. And I said, so we were spending about $700,000 a year on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He had been spending $2 million on digital. Now he had to keep doing that till the radio took hold.
Right.
That's painful. So on top of the $2 million, he had to add the $700,000. That hurts like hell. But he kept it up. But at the end of that many months, you know how much he had shrunk the digital down to? $500,000.
Mm.
And so by spending $700,000, a year later, 14 months, baby, we had shrunk a $2 million digital budget to a $500,000 digital budget plus a $700,000 radio budget. So now we're spending $1.2 million as opposed to $2 million.
Yeah, that's a nice savings.
And he goes, hey, you want to go into a second town? And I said, what town do you have in mind? And he named it. And he said, do you have any clients there in this category? And I said, no. He said, can I go there? And I said, yes, let's go there together. So we did. And then we exploded in that town. Boom, and we're off to the races. But what we had to do first was cause Gettle to be the name that people think of first and feel the best about. And it took a story about a little boy with a flashlight and a bunch of other stories about his dog that he trusts and his wife that he loves and his dad that he misses and a woman that you love and a dog that you think has good judgment, a dog that you think is a really good judge of people, and all these other ads that most people aren't familiar with that followed a little boy with a flashlight. You're never talking about the product. You're just getting to know the person.
Right.
And you like the person. You trust the person. That's the person that you think of first and feel the best about when that category is named. What do most private equity guys do when they take over a company?
Very quickly, they get rid of all the things that can't be measured.
Right.
In their way of measuring.
Exactly.
things.
And so what happens is no matter how much you educate them, no matter how much you tell them, no matter how much you say, please protect this at all costs, this is what built the company. And if you don't keep this alive, the company will implode.
Right.
They never believe you when you say that. And so I always just say, you know what? Everybody's getting rich. Everybody's walking away with tons of money. It's just sad that the thing that built the company suddenly disappears.
Well, Roy, this is a statement for the listeners and watchers. In the next episode, we're actually going to go really deep and really wide on this topic. So if you're getting to the end here, episode 17 is going to be the truth of Google and search advertising. And just consider this teeing it up. So, Roy, in closing here, what's the one thing people should take from today's episode?
The thing that is the most persuasive, the thing that has the highest impact, is not the easiest thing to measure.
You've been listening to Tulip, Todd Liles, and the Wizard of Ads, where the bold win and the remarkable reign. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss a conversation. If you want a copy of the show notes or watch the ads from today's show, head over to toddliles.com/wizard. This episode is dedicated to the business owners who refuse to be ordinary.